In just 32 seconds, that's all it took for the Supreme Court's marble walls to tremble. John Roberts' voice cracked like a gavel spitting, "Go back to Africa" at Jasmine Crockett in front of the nation. Gasps hit like thunder, and every camera lens became a witness to history's ugliest echo. What Jasmine did next turned that echo into a roar heard across America. The microphone stands between them, cold and unblinking. Chief Justice John Roberts leans in his voice low, but slicing through the air. "Go back to Africa." The words drop like a hammer on glass, and something in the room cracks. For 32 seconds, no one moves. The marble walls seem to pull the heat out of the air, leaving only the hum of the lights above. It's as if the building itself refuses to breathe. Sonia Sotomayor's eyes widen, a flash of disbelief breaking her composure. Stephen Breyer's brow tightens, his pen suspended mid-stroke. Amy Coney Barrett stares down at the bench, her knuckles bone white against the wood. The court reporter freezes fingers, hovering above the keys. A bailiff shifts his weight, the sound of his shoe against stone far too loud in the stillness. Somewhere in the gallery, a breath catches and never lets go. Jasmine Crockett stands perfectly still. Light cuts a sharp edge across her face, her body unmoving, her pulse a steady drum against the silence. She does not blink. The cameras hold their focus. Lenses tighten, feeding the moment to millions who don't yet know they're watching history. A red tally light glows like an open wound. A pen falls from a journalist's hand and clatters to the floor. No one reaches for it. The silence tightens until it feels like it might snap. Robert's flush fades to a pale mask, but his fingers tap out in uneven rhythm. His eyes shift, he knows he's crossed a line he can't erase. Phones rise slowly from laps to eye level, every hand a witness. Security stands frozen. There's no protocol for stopping time. The moment is already out in the world. Jasmine takes one long, quiet breath. Her gaze never leaves Roberts, her stance unbroken. The insult slides off her like rain hitting stone. The seal above the bench looms heavier, its Latin promise of justice hanging hollow in the air. The past and present pressed together until they're the same unbearable second. Somewhere in the gallery, a smirk begins and dies. A whisper forms, falters, and disappears. Even the air feels like it's waiting. Then Jasmine moves. From the crook of her arm, she draws a red envelope, the color of a warning that dares you to ignore it. The paper edge catches the light like a blade. She steps forward, heels striking stone with a measured cadence. Her shadow climbs the lectern. The envelope lands with a sharp, deliberate tap, and her eyes never leave John Roberts. The morning light in Washington is thin and cold, spilling between the steel frames of her hotel window. Jasmine Crockett sits at a small desk, a stack of files spread before her, like weapons laid out for battle. She wears a navy blazer, sharp at the shoulders, every seam pressed with purpose. Her phone buzzes once. No name, no picture, just a single message. "They will try to humiliate you. Don't give them the pleasure." The words sit on the screen like a dare, the kind you either ignore or answer with fire. Outside, the city is already awake. Police barriers line the streets leading to the Supreme Court, their metal catching the early light. Jasmine walks with her chin-high briefcase in hand, her heels marking a steady rhythm against the pavement. The air is electric, two crowds divided by signs, voices, and intent. On one side, cheers rise, hands waving homemade posters with her name painted in bold strokes. On the other, jeers and chants crash like waves, their words sharp enough to cut. A woman in the front row of the protest holds a placard that reads, "Go home," in thick black ink. Jasmine doesn't flinch, her eyes fixed on the white dome in the distance. Every step feels like walking deeper into a storm she's already decided to face. As she nears the main steps, the media swarm grows thicker. Cameras track her from the moment she's in sight, shutters snapping with relentless precision. Every flash turns her face into a headline waiting to be written. A journalist leans toward another voice, low but carrying in the crisp morning air. That's her, the one they're gunning for. The words hang there, not meant for her ears, but impossible to ignore. Security at the main entrance barely glances at the others in line, but their eyes narrow when she steps forward. IDs are checked twice, the guard's fingers lingering longer on hers than necessary. The air between them is polite, but it's the politeness you give a stranger you've already judged. She walks past the final checkpoint, the heavy doors of the Supreme Court looming ahead. Each step toward them is a choice forward into scrutiny, forward into risk, forward into the kind of moment that can rewrite a career or erase it. Somewhere deep inside, she knows this day won't end quietly. And though she can't yet hear the words, Roberts will say something in her bones tells her they're already on their way. The doors of the Supreme Court close behind her, with a sound that feels final. White light pours from above, unforgiving and cold, bouncing off marble walls that hold decades of history. The air smells faintly of polished wood and the kind of stillness that only exists where power sleeps with its eyes open. Rows of heavy wooden benches stretch in perfect symmetry, their grain worn smooth by years of weighty moments. The air is cool enough to raise goosebumps, but not enough to mask the heat of 100 watching eyes. Somewhere overhead, the great seal of the court stares down, a silent reminder that judgment here is absolute. From the highest bench, John Roberts looks down at her like a man surveying his board before the first move. His expression is carved from something colder than stone, unreadable, except for the faint curl at the corner of his mouth. It's the look of someone who already believes they know how the game will end. Jasmine steps to the podium, her files stacked neatly, each page a calculated strike. Her voice rises into the chamber, not loud, not rushed, but with the weight of someone who has no time to waste. She begins with a story, not statistics, a black veteran in Texas who served his country only to be turned away from the ballot box. The room holds still, every word painting a picture sharper than any chart. She speaks of the man's hands scarred from years of labor, holding the ID that somehow still wasn't enough. She lets the silence after each sentence settle like dust in sunlight. Some justices lean slightly forward listening. Others avert their gaze, pretending to scan their notes but hearing every word. Jasmine's tone doesn't plead, it indicts, and that makes it harder to look away. Roberts's posture shifts. He leans back, first eyes narrowing, the faint rhythm of his fingertips tapping against the wood in front of him. Then slowly he comes forward, elbows resting on the bench, as though closing the distance by choice. His eyes sharpen, the weight of his attention dropping directly on her. The tapping grows deliberate, a signal only he understands. The chamber seems to contract around the two of them, the air thinning in the space between his gaze and her resolve. And then, without a word, his hand stills his silence, carrying a challenge she can feel as much as see. It's the quiet before the first strike. Jasmine is halfway through her sentence when the interruption comes sharp, clean, designed to slice. Robert's voice cuts across hers like a blade through fabric. Maybe focus on your real constituents, not the cameras. His tone is controlled, but it carries the weight of a man accustomed to having the last word. The room stills again, though not with shock this time. It's anticipation. Heads turn slightly, eyes darting between the bench and the podium. In the gallery, a reporter's pen pauses mid-stroke, the ink beginning to pool in a single spot. Jasmine doesn't flinch. Her eyes find his holding there without the slightest shift. My constituents, she says, evenly, are Americans, all of them. The emphasis lands like a hammer, steady and deliberate. A low, almost dismissive rolls from one of the associate justices. It hangs in the air like an unwelcome draft, carrying with it the unspoken approval of Roberts's jab. A few heads in the gallery tilt forward, straining to catch the next exchange. Roberts leans back for a breath, fingers tapping once, twice against the polished wood. His expression doesn't change, but something in the set of his jaw promises escalation. The pause is long enough to feel dangerous. Jasmine waits, not filling the silence, letting it stretch taut between them. She knows a man like Roberts will rush to fill the gap, and when he does, he'll show more than he intends. The cameras catch the subtle lift of her chin, the faintest trace of a challenge. Then it comes. Roberts leans forward again, his mouth curling into something between a smile and a sneer. The bench creaks softly under his shift in weight. His eyes sharpen as if he's sighting a target he's been waiting all morning to hit. When he speaks next, his voice is lower, deliberate, the words shaped to pierce. It's the kind of sentence that doesn't just land, it lodges. And in that instant, the chamber seems to lean in, sensing that the line between debate and disaster is about to vanish. Roberts doesn't raise his voice. He doesn't have to. If you don't like how we do things, go back to Africa. The words slide into the chamber like a cold blade, and the temperature drops with them. It's the kind of line that leaves no room for misinterpretation. Every breath in the room stops. Even the hum of the overhead lights seems to vanish, as if the building itself recoils. For a moment, no one is sure if they actually heard what they just heard or if the echo in their mind is playing tricks. The stenographer freezes her fingers, suspended just above the keys. A faint tremor runs through her hands before she lets them drop to her lap. It's the first time in years she's hesitated to record. Sotomayor tilts her head, a slow, deliberate motion that speaks volumes without a single word. Kagan's eyes snap toward Roberts, sharp and unyielding. Barrett drops her gaze to the polished wood of the bench, retreating from the moment entirely. In the gallery, someone exhales too loudly, the sound ricocheting off marble. Phones half hidden in laps begin to tilt upward, drawn by a force stronger than discretion. Security shifts their weight but stays rooted. There is no protocol for this. Jasmine stands still, her posture carved from something unbreakable. The insult lingers between them, a challenge disguised as a dismissal. She doesn't blink, doesn't speak. Instead, she closes her eyes for precisely 2 seconds, shutting out the noise, the heat, the scrutiny. When her eyes open again, they are no longer the same. They are sharpened steel, a blade unsheathed and ready. The air between her and Roberts tightens as though it might snap under the weight of what's coming next. Somewhere in the second row, a whisper rises and dies instantly. Even the carved walls seem to lean in, listening. This is no longer a hearing, it's a duel, and everyone knows the first strike has already landed. Jasmine doesn't raise her voice. She doesn't need to. Let's talk about where your family came from, Chief Justice. The sentence lands with a precision strike, clean and intentional. For a heartbeat, the chamber doesn't move, unsure if they just witnessed a counterpunch or the opening of a new front. A low ripple runs through the gallery, the sound of bodies shifting and whispers finding their way between rows. Reporters lean forward and pens poised above paper, every lens tightening focus on her. Somewhere near the back, a phone camera clicks its shutter, far too loud in the tension. Jasmine's hand moves with slow certainty, reaching into the stack beside her. She draws out a single red envelope, its color almost violent against the polished wood. The paper glows under the harsh light, demanding attention from every eye in the room. She places it on the podium like a card in a high-stakes game. The room leans in, not physically, but with the weight of curiosity pressing toward her. Even the security guards seem caught in the pull of what might come next. With deliberate care, she slides the contents halfway out. The stark black stamp, Chicago Police Dep. 1924, catches the light, bold and undeniable. The letters seem to burn against the cream-colored paper, heavy with history. Roberts's brow tightens, a subtle furrow that betrays recognition before he can stop it. His jaw works once, as if forming a word he doesn't dare let loose. The faint tapping of his fingers is gone, now replaced by stillness. The murmurs swell into a low, rolling hum. Justices exchange sidelong glances, some eyes sharp with interest, others clouded with unease. The document has shifted the air. What was once accusation is now evidence. Jasmine doesn't break eye contact. Her fingertips rest on the edge of the file, not lifting it, yet letting its presence speak before its contents do. The power has shifted, subtle but absolute, and everyone in the chamber feels it. Roberts exhales slowly, the sound barely audible, but heavy enough to carry. His gaze drops to the envelope, then back to her. And in that locked moment, the outcome of this confrontation begins to take shape. Jasmine pulls the document free, the paper whispering against the envelope. The header is bold, unmistakable, Chicago Police Dep. 1924, followed by a name that freezes the room. It's the arrest record of John Roberts' grandfather, taken in during a violent anti-black riot. The gallery reacts, first sharp intakes of breath, shifting bodies, the scrape of shoes on marble. Reporters lean in so far, it looks as if they might fall from their seats. The cameras drink it all in, their red lights burning like beacons. Jasmine's voice is steady, but every syllable cuts with surgical precision. If we're sending people back based on family history, Ireland's waiting. The words hang in the air, like smoke from a gunshot, impossible to ignore. A single clap breaks the silence, quick, defiant. Then another joins it. In seconds, the chamber swells with applause, a tidal wave of sound that rolls over every attempt at decorum. Even some seated in the reserved rows can't help but bring their hands together. Robert's face tightens, color blooming high on his cheeks. His hand grips the gavel knuckles, pale, the polished wood trembling faintly. The weight of the applause presses against him, a public verdict before any official ruling. Jasmine doesn't smile. Her expression is one of unflinching resolve. She stands rooted, the document still in hand, as if daring him to challenge its authenticity. The sound in the room has shifted from polite observation to something far more dangerous, collective judgment. The gavel comes down once the sharp crack slicing through the noise, but failing to kill it. He strikes again harder, the echo rattling against the marble. Still the applause surges, drowning each blow, like waves swallowing stone. From the bench, other justices exchange uneasy glances. Some look to Roberts, others to Jasmine, as if quietly calculating where the tide is turning. In the gallery, a man rises to his feet, clapping above his head, and more follow. Roberts slams the gavel a final time, the sound splintering in frustration. But it's no use, the roar of approval for Jasmine Crockett has already claimed the chamber. And in that moment, it's clear the power in this room has shifted hands. The applause fades, but the air stays charged, humming with the aftershock. Jasmine doesn't waste the silence, she steps into it, voice firm, eyes locked on the bench. Let me tell you about a man who wore this nation's uniform, who bled for its flag, and who was told his ID wasn't good enough to vote. A murmur ripples through the gallery. She paints the picture in unflinching detail, the veteran's hands scarred from decades of labor, holding the same documents a white neighbor used without question. His walk back home was longer than his walk to the polling station, and heavier. She shifts seamlessly, her tone tightening like a noose. Or the Latina mother in my district whose street was carved out of her voting precinct by a line that bent like a snake, gerrymandered into silence because her voice might change the outcome. The words strike like hammer blows, each one aimed with purpose. The audience leans in their expressions, shifting from curiosity to something sharper. Even those who came to oppose her feel the weight of the stories, the undeniability of lived truth. The cameras catch every face, every flinch, every tightened jaw. On the bench, some justices glance at each other, their composure cracking ever so slightly. The details Jasmine lays bare aren't abstractions, they're evidence, and they're being recorded in real time. No amount of legal jargon can erase the images she's etching into the nation's memory. Her voice never wavers. These aren't statistics. These are Americans. They've earned more than the right to be here. They've earned the right to be heard. The sentence lands heavy, resonating in the bones of the room. A conservative justice who has sat rigid all morning shifts in his seat. Slowly, almost reluctantly, he nods once. The movement is small but clear, and the nearest camera catches it in perfect focus. Somewhere in the press row, a shutter clicks at the exact moment his chin dips. Jasmine sees it. She doesn't react outwardly, but the flicker in her eyes says she knows exactly what it means. The ground beneath Roberts has begun to tilt, and she's the one holding the lever. Jasmine lets the weight of the nod linger in the room, then takes a single step forward. Her gaze sweeps across the bench, across the gallery, across every lens trained on her. American values, she says, voice rising with each word, aren't decided by the color of your skin or your zip code. The sentence cuts clean through the air, impossible to misinterpret. A beat of silence follows, as if the room needs a second to absorb it. Then, almost in unison, people begin to rise. First from the gallery, then from the benches, then from the farthest corners of the chamber, one by one, until the whole room is on its feet. The sound of chairs scraping against marble becomes its own kind of applause. On the bench, some justices hold their expressions, but others can't help the small shifts in their eyes. The cameras capture every flicker, every reluctant acknowledgement. Robert's grip on the gavel tightens, his jaw locked as he scans the standing crowd. Jasmine stands rooted, her voice steady as the tide. They are decided by the courage to stand for what's right, even when it's not convenient. They are decided by whether we let truth speak louder than power. Her words seem to vibrate in the marble itself. In the gallery, the energy shifts from restrained to unstoppable. People lean forward, some with tears glinting in their eyes, others with the kind of fierce pride that refuses to fade. The moment feels bigger than the case, bigger than the court. It feels like a reckoning. Then, faint at first, a chant begins to rise from outside. The sound seeps in through the thick walls, muffled but unmistakable. Resign, Roberts. It grows louder, swelling with each repetition, a tidal surge of voices echoing from the steps of the Supreme Court. Inside, the standing crowd turns toward the doors as if to listen. Reporters exchange quick glances, some already typing furiously. Roberts shifts in his seat, but the chant outside only grows stronger, spilling into the chamber like a storm breaking through locked gates. Jasmine doesn't move, her eyes still locked on Roberts. The chant is no longer outside, it's here in the walls and the floor, in the air between them. And for the first time since she walked into the room, it's not just her voice challenging him, it's the nation's. The chant outside becomes the soundtrack of the moment, and before the crowd disperses, the clip is already online. 32 seconds, raw, uncut Roberts' voice, Jasmine's stare, the gavel, the defiance. By the end of the first hour, it's hit 1 million views and is still climbing like a runaway train. On talk shows across the country, hosts replay the footage in slow motion, dissecting every micro-expression. Radio callers flood the lines, their voices shaking with anger, pride, or both. In church basements and coffee shops, strangers huddle over phones, watching the clip together as if it's the weather report of a coming storm. Cable news networks run split screens, Jasmine's words on one side, Roberts' face on the other, looped until they burn into the nation's collective mind. Late-night hosts deliver monologues that are equal parts outrage and admiration. Hashtags explode. Nier, Crockett, truth. Niar, resign Roberts, and a new one. 32 seconds becomes the rallying cry. Inside political circles, phones buzz without pause. Staffers swap theories on damage control, while strategists whisper about how this changes the next election. The clip isn't just trending, it's defining. Every share, every comment, every stitch on social media deepens the fault line between those who defend Roberts and those who see his words as the final straw. By nightfall, crowds have doubled outside the Supreme Court steps. Some hold signs quoting Jasmine word for word. Others carry portraits of civil rights leaders, linking her name to a legacy of resistance. The atmosphere is part protest, part vigil, part history lesson unfolding in real time. Then, just as the media frenzy reaches its peak, a new ripple tears through the noise. A well-known investigative journalist tweets a single image, the front page of a long-sealed Harvard thesis written by John Roberts. The caption is simple: "Why was this hidden?" But it detonates like a grenade. Within minutes, the screenshot is everywhere. Speculation roars to life: what's in it, who hid it, and why it's surfacing now. Reporters begin calling former classmates, law professors, anyone who might have read it before it disappeared from public record. And as the nation debates whether this leak is connected to Jasmine's confrontation, one thing becomes clear: the storm Roberts tried to contain in the chamber has now broken wide open, and it's spilling into every corner of American life. The leaked thesis is no dusty academic relic, it's a manifesto in plain sight. In its yellowed pages, Roberts argues that some cultures lack the civic discipline for full participation in democracy. The sentence is underlined in red by the journalist who released it, and the image flashes across every major network. Within hours, more fragments surface, dismissive references to minority communities, veiled suggestions that voting rights should be earned rather than guaranteed. Commentators don't need to embellish. The words indict themselves. Clips from the thesis spread like wildfire, cut together with his "go back to Africa" remark until the two feel like part of the same breath. Then the voices start, former clerks stepping out of the shadows. One recalls him referring to black defendants in chambers as those people. Another describes hearing him joke about immigrant names during a private lunch with fellow justices. Every quote is another crack in the marble image he's built over decades. Past rulings are pulled into the light cases, where his vote quietly tilted against civil rights plaintiffs, where protections for minority voters were chipped away under the guise of procedural reform. Analysts map the pattern like a weather system, showing it was never random, it was a forecast. In living rooms and town halls, people watch the dots connect in real time. The scandal is no longer about one outburst in court, it's about a worldview baked into years of decisions. Trust, once the court's invisible armor begins to splinter in public view. Cable anchors speak in hushed urgency, their tone reserved for war coverage or natural disasters. This isn't just about one man, one says. It's about the integrity of the institution itself. On split screens, footage of the protests outside the Supreme Court now shares space with scrolling excerpts from the thesis. By late evening, the story reaches the Capitol. Members of Congress emerge from closed-door meetings, their expressions set in grim lines. Microphones swarm as the Speaker of the House steps forward to announce what everyone suspected was coming. In light of these revelations, she says Congress will convene an emergency hearing. The words hang like a bell tolling over Washington, loud, clear, and impossible to ignore. By morning, the message is no longer coming from one side of the aisle, it's coming from both. Prominent Republicans, usually quick to shield the court from criticism, step in front of cameras with measured but unmistakable words. The Chief Justice should consider what is best for the country. Democrats drop the careful phrasing altogether, calling openly, unanimously for his resignation. Editorial boards from coast to coast weigh in their headlines stark and unforgiving. The calls for accountability aren't whispers anymore. They're printed in bold type and read aloud on morning news shows. Even talk radio, long a bastion for defending conservative jurists, is split down the middle. Outside the Supreme Court, the crowd swells beyond the steps, spilling into the surrounding streets. Helicopter shots capture a sea of signs and chanting voices, a patchwork of generations, and causes converging into one demand. Veterans of the civil rights movement say they haven't seen numbers like this since the 1960s. The sound is relentless, thunderous chants rolling in waves, punctuated by bursts of applause whenever Jasmine's name is mentioned from a megaphone. News crews wade through the crowd, catching tearful interviews with elders who marched half a century ago and young activists who weren't even born when Roberts first took the bench. The energy is part protest, part history repeating itself. Inside, the marble corridors of the court feel smaller than ever. Staff move briskly but avoid each other's eyes as if the walls themselves might be listening. Every phone in the building is buzzing with alerts, every inbox flooded with statements and press inquiries. By late afternoon, the narrative is no longer in Roberts' hands. It's in the crowds and the headlines and the endless churn of social media. The longer he stays silent, the louder the demand becomes. And silence in this storm feels like an admission. Then just before sunset, a push notification lights up every screen in the press pool. Chief Justice John Roberts' office announces he will address the nation tomorrow morning. The words ricochet from reporter to reporter through the crowd outside and back into the marble halls, an announcement heavy enough to promise that whatever comes next will either end this fight or set it ablaze. The podium is flanked by flags, but the man standing behind it looks smaller than he ever has. Chief Justice John Roberts grips the sides as though they're the only things keeping him upright. When he begins to speak, his voice is steady for half a sentence, then wavers. "I will be stepping down," he says, eyes fixed on the prepared statement. He doesn't look at the cameras, not once. Instead, his gaze drifts somewhere over the heads of the reporters to a place where he doesn't have to meet the judgment staring back. The words are clipped, stripped of emotion, but the tremor in his tone betrays him. He thanks his colleagues, speaks of service and the weight of the role. But there's no defense, no fight, just the brittle cadence of a man trying to reach the end of the page. When he finishes, there's no applause, only the staccato burst of camera shutters. Questions are shouted, but he doesn't answer. The gavel of public opinion has already fallen. He steps away, leaving the podium and the position behind. Across the city in her congressional office, Jasmine watches on a muted screen. Her pen moves steadily across a legal pad, jotting notes without looking up. She doesn't smile, doesn't shake her head, just writes as if documenting another chapter in a story she's been telling all along. Around her, aides glance between the broadcasts and their phones, unsure if they should speak. The muted screen shows Roberts disappearing behind a curtain, swallowed by the shadows backstage. Jasmine underlines a phrase she's just written, taps her pen twice, and closes the folder in front of her. Then her phone lights up. A message from a colleague flashes across the screen. Voting Rights Act is back on the floor. We have the numbers. The words are brief, but they carry the force of a tide turning. She leans back in her chair, eyes on the closed folder. For the first time that day, the corners of her mouth lift not in triumph, but in recognition. This isn't the end of the fight. It's the moment the battle moves forward. The resignation doesn't end the story, it detonates a chain reaction. By the next morning, Fortune 500 companies release statements pledging new diversity initiatives. Universities announce scholarships for underrepresented students, and pastors stand at pulpits calling for congregations to turn outrage into action. Social media feeds flood with photos of protests, teach-ins, and candlelight vigils. Clips of Jasmine's speech are played in classrooms not as breaking news but as history lessons. Across the country, murals begin to appear, her profile painted alongside Martin Luther King Jr., Fannie Lou Hamer, and John Lewis. Jasmine returns to her hometown in Texas under a sky heavy with late summer heat. The streets are lined with people, neighbors, old classmates, elders who watched her grow up. They push forward to embrace her, some whispering, "Thank you," others simply holding on as if they've been waiting years to exhale. She visits the church where her grandmother once sang in the choir. The congregation rises when she steps inside, the sound of hands clapping, filling the wooden rafters. She walks slowly down the aisle, shaking hands, touching shoulders, letting herself be surrounded by the people she fought for. At the local park, children run up to her, holding handmade signs with her name in block letters. One little girl tugs at her sleeve and asks if she can be brave like you when I grow up. Jasmine kneels to her level, smiles, and says, "You already are." That evening, she sits under the warm lights of a national TV studio. The host leans in the cameras, pulling closer, knowing millions are watching. He asks the question everyone has been waiting to hear. "What's next for you?" The studio falls silent, the pause stretching just long enough to feel deliberate. Jasmine's eyes don't leave his, and a faint knowing smile curves her lips. Outside the glass, the city hums, unaware that her next words might set the tone for the battles yet to come. The studio lights catch the edge of her jaw, framing her face in a halo of gold. Jasmine leans toward the camera, her voice steady, each word carrying the weight of the last year. Justice isn't a gift. It's a fight, and it belongs to all of us. The line doesn't hang. It strikes. Somewhere in living rooms across America, people lean closer to their screens. In that moment, she's not speaking as a politician or a witness. She's speaking as one of them. She rises from her chair, the crew already moving to cut to commercial, but she waves them off. Removing her mic, she walks toward the studio doors with purpose. Outside, the glass walls reveal a waiting crowd pressed against the barriers, phones in hand, voices ready. The door swings open and the noise hits like a wave. Cheers chants, the rhythm of countless feet shifting forward. Jasmine steps into it without hesitation, the golden light of sunset stretching her shadow across the pavement. Hands reach out from every direction, not to pull her away, but to close the distance between them. She moves through them, slowly shaking hands, meeting eyes, absorbing the energy. The air smells of asphalt cooling under dusk of perfume, and protest signs still damp from fresh paint. Each step feels less like an exit and more like a march. A chant starts somewhere near the front, low, at first then louder until it rolls like thunder, her name paired with a single word: justice. It bounces off the buildings, climbs into the orange sky, and refuses to fade. Cameras follow her, but for once they aren't leading, she is. As the sun dips behind the city, she stops at the edge of the crowd and turns back toward the lenses. Her eyes narrow, but her voice softens, like she's sharing a secret with millions. If 32 seconds can shake the highest bench, imagine what millions can do together. Truth and courage can shake an entire system if you dare to speak. One moment of standing up today can inspire millions tomorrow. So when faced with injustice, will you stay silent, or will you act? If this story lit a fire in you, don't just keep it to yourself. Like it, share it with someone who refuses to look away, and subscribe to Hill Insights, where courage speaks louder than fear and every truth finds its voice. Turn on the bell, because the next story, it's already taking shape, and it might just change the way you see justice, power, and yourself. Tell us what moment hit you the hardest. Drop it in the comments so we remember it together, not just as viewers, but as witnesses. Let's carry it beyond this screen into every conversation, every choice, every stand we take. This dramatized story draws from real battles and real people. It's not here to divide. It's here to wake us, to remind us that change is not a miracle. It's a choice. Thank you for watching. And remember, truth doesn't fade when the lights go out. It waits for someone like you to keep it alive.